On. We have an abbreviated crew right now. Just to let you know, I'm recording this because several people could not be there today. And I want to take advantage of people's times. John has said he has to leave by 9:45, so hopefully we can complete our call there. We have a couple items on the agenda, just an update on the property reports on all the lock houses, and then most of the time I really am interested in hearing about John's class and lab and their final results, and then to talk a little bit about our upcoming work, and is there a way of identifying several of the lock houses that are priorities, and then finally thinking about this. Harry Stone has invited us to recommend discussion items for an upcoming Ohio River inspection tour, that they go from, the Ohio, the Mississippi, the Missouri, and Tennessee River, and this summer is the inspection tour. And so I wanted to see about recommending somebody to talk about the piece. And then finally, to help promote the webinar coming up in May on transportation on the river. So unless if there's any other items for the agenda, let's see who's on. We have Trish is on. Are you still there, Trish? Can you hear us?
Yep, I'm here. Yeah, I can see it. Yep.
All right. She's on her phone. She's driving someplace right now, so she can't hear this, but we'll copy that. Just as a quick update, I did speak with Mark, and they are proceeding with the analysis of the property management, both from the Louisville district and the Huntington district, to verify all of the locations and current property ownership of all of the locks. I did attach, there's this fascinating 2010 cruising guide, and there's a whole section on the old lock houses. So I attached that to the email. But there's no more news on that front, besides saying it's an ongoing process. And so if there's no other comments, John, would love to hear what you've done with your lab, and feel free, take it away.
Sure. Well, first off, just to introduce myself, I was invited to the last meeting, and I was sick and I couldn't attend. So nice to be with everyone today. I'm an architect. I'm also a part-time educator as well. Led a group of capstone students in architecture on somewhat of an introductory design research project along the Ohio River. So we were getting into a couple different aspects. I'll share my screen with you. For those of you here, let's see. So maybe just a couple things to report. We organized some design research projects. We were basically proposing a series of public spaces for recreation along the Ohio River, but the scope of our project was really from Cincinnati to Pittsburgh. So maybe I can expand one of these maps here. Let me see if I can expand this. And I would, what's the best way to show this? I think, we had enough students where we were able to divide and conquer the river. We organized ourselves into 4 kind of research groups. The one that's most relevant to this committee is a group that we called Aging Infrastructure. We were looking at sites of old locks and dams along the river, and proposing potentially like a prototype solution for how we could renovate these sites. Essentially how we could provide river access at these sites. And we looked at Lock 19, Lock 31, Lock 32, and Lock 15. So all kind of up and down from Cincinnati to Pittsburgh. I should say, just maybe might be easiest. We're doing posting some work on Instagram, but we also have a really nice link here that is publishing some work as a virtual exhibition. So if you click this link, you're basically taken to all of these student projects along the river. You'll see that there's a couple of different categories. We were looking at a farming cooperative. We're looking at the kayak challenge along the river. We were looking at a couple of very unique sites that we kind of titled In Between Spaces, and the group that I was talking about. So I guess just like maybe just really quickly, the thing that stuck out to me as I was maybe just getting into this research was that I think there's a tremendous opportunity to respond to these sites, both as like a big kind of ecological system. There's about one of these sites every 15 miles along the river. And at the same time that there's a tremendous opportunity to kind of respond locally to like what one community needs, right? So like a site in Vansburg might be very different than a site in, let's say, Parkersburg. Or so I don't know. I mean, a lot of our conversations in our group were thinking about what is like a system kind of approach to fixing these or to adding maybe a program to these sites, or to adding some kind of function to these sites. But at the end of the day, it was really about drawing people to the river and providing that kind of wayfinding access point onto the river, just trying to promote that. So I'd absolutely invite everyone. I'll share a link in the chat, but invite everyone to just kind of browse some of these projects. I think we ended up with like a little bit of research here that a lot of you probably in the committee are familiar with, but just really trying to unpack like why these sites even exist to begin with, and the kind of transformation of the river over time. So David, I don't know, I stayed really broad level. I don't know, as an introductory.
Could you share the link in the chat now?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me do that. And I'll.
And so were there one of those or two of those locks that students investigated that have an immediate need for attention and focus and making sure they are stabilized?
Yeah, I would say, let me share this link first, and then I would say that the four, so we looked specifically at 4 sites, and they were all very different. You know, like Lock 19 is a lockhouse that's vacant and has kind of a, I'll send one more link here. Yeah, so our site way up here, closer to Pittsburgh in Sardis, Ohio, it's already being used kind of recreationally as a park, which was really fascinating. The lockhouse had been kind of wiped clean. As we get closer to Cincinnati, here close to Parkersburg, this is Lockhouse 19. This is a large brick structure that's vacant. It's a very significant structure, one of the few remaining. This has a lot of land associated with it, and kind of an informal access point, like a little gravel road that goes down to the river for fishermen. Lock 31, this is just outside of Portsmouth. This was a really fascinating site. This has a kind of a campus of buildings associated with it, and a very steep embankment. down to kind of a demolished site. No Lockhouse remaining, but very, very interesting site. And then the one just lower than that, so that was Lock 31. Lock 32 in Vanceburg, I think some of you are familiar with that one. That's the closest one to Cincinnati that we got, but that is being used by, there's some like a bus parking lot and some ball fields. Not necessarily, there's also an old Lockhouse there as well. It reminds me a lot of Chilo. So the sites were very different, you know, like some Lockhouses were still remaining, but they were vacant. There were some kind of informal uses on the site already. And so, you know, I think maybe the biggest question is really, in my mind, is like, if we are to propose like a renovation to one of these sites, the biggest question is, what are the local communities that are most impacted by that, and what are their needs, right? Like what are their needs? But if we look more globally, the question is, do all of these sites, you know, there's about 30 sites here, 36, 37 sites from Cincinnati to Pittsburgh. Do these function as some kind of network or some kind of system, park system or access point system recreationally? You know, there's some regional opportunities, but there's also some very kind of hyper local opportunities as well, as we think about like the future of these sites.
Did your students interact with any of the people around these, or was it more virtual? And
yeah, given COVID, we had to stay kind of virtual. We made it. One of the students made it out to Parkersburg for Lock 19 and was able to talk with some community leaders and organizations in Parkersburg. They were very interested in kind of historical exhibitions and kind of cultural uses for the site. We had very surface level conversations with them, but this studio was set up for travel, and then we got hit by COVID, and so we had to kind of stay virtual, unfortunately, at least for this first round. We do hope to kind of continue some of this research in a future studio and get a little bit more specific, although this was pretty high level information.
you know, interestingly, there in Parkersburg, they've just have been designated as a national recreation area for the Ohio River with the Park Service. And so there's significant work going on in Parkersburg about the relationship to the river.
Yeah.
And that might be a #1 category or #1 piece.
Yeah. Yeah, and these sites are the other important thing to note is the sites, all these sites, most of the sites are vacant or underutilized. They are still informally being used. You'll see pictures of people fishing off of these sites. This is more than likely a little a party house of some sort that we have some graffiti and an informal gathering point. But there's some life to these sites, I should say. But the question again is just about like formalizing access to the river and kind of acknowledging the history of what's happened along the river. So as we understand it, a series of wooden wickets, dam wickets were constructed in the early 1900s. And then in, I think, mid-1900s, like a larger set of lock and dam structures was constructed, rendering the first set somewhat outdated, too small for increasing traffic on the river. So a lot of these sites were just ended up either being demolished, exploded, or are kind of left to crumble, as this site was along the river. I don't want to take up too much time, but I do, I think this was a great excuse for me to kind of start my history lesson into the river. I didn't know a lot of this information going into this semester, but very interested in the potential of these sites.
David, can you hear me?
I can.
As we're talking about this, and with my experience from last summer of paddling, I'm wondering, and then with the meeting that we had Tuesday from the Rails to Trails guy, I wonder if long term we could think about creating something in addition to what you guys have done with the Ohio River Recreational Trail, or add to that to create something more like the bike trails that, like the Greater Allegheny Passage that he talked about, where in addition to mapping out access points and things, there are definitive places to camp or to stay the night. And these, when John talked about those, these old lock areas being a network, that would be, to me, seems to be a perfect use for those spaces, along with just access points, but find a way to make them primitive camping sites for through passage on the river.
Trish, I think that's a perfect idea. And interestingly enough, the National Park Service Lewis and Clark Historic Trail is investigating that to sort of see, is there a bike trail that could be designated along the entire Ohio River, and how these lockhouses, well, I want to interject how the lockhouses fit into that National Park Service proposed bike trail. And I 100% agree. I think it'd be a use by both, you know, river-oriented people and shoreline recreational people. So no, I'm in complete agreement. I think it makes total sense, Trish. You know, let me share my screen here for a second. And
yeah, absolutely.
See if I can do this here for. I'm fascinated with that. Can I share that information that you just shared? You know, with the committee. Do you mind if I send that link out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just the final thing I wanted to mention is we had prepared this map of current status of all the lockhouses, the 37 lockhouses between Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. It's, you know, it's not a precise location for each one because it's such a big scale, right? We're looking at like 500 miles of the river. But nevertheless, it at least gives us kind of a broad level survey of the quantity of lockhouse sites that are out there and what their current status is.
And is that a Word document or a PDF?
It's a map. It's a visual. It's a map. But I can share a link to that map as well in the chat in just a minute. So you'll have that. You can download that image. You can also share that as needed.
You know, I think as Mark said, he was asking his wife to do this property assessment on all the lockhouses, and that would be a valuable piece for him. Absolutely. But I wanted to put up here, and Trish, you can't see this, but this comes from the Kentucky Division of Tourism, Seth Wheat, who unfortunately hasn't been on one of our calls yet. He's a good friend of mine, and he has recommended that we really look at the C&O Canal that goes from DC on up. And they have taken their canal quarters, which is basically their old lockhouses, and have, with funds from the federal government, transformed them into bed and breakfasts. And so you can, on your bicycle, car trip, whatever, reserve any one of these old lockhouses that are on the system, and then they have their nice little map of where they are. And from what I understand, they're going to add 2 more. So they started out with 1, and they're slowly adding this to a network. The thing that fascinates me is that there is a federal funding source that could help us with that, called FLAP, which is Federal Lands Access Program. And so that provides funding for historic restoration, public access. Victor Elam with U.S. Fish and Wildlife just got $1 million from that for developing a boat ramp and fixing his interpretive center for the islands in the Ohio River Wildlife Refuge. And so, you know, it's a long-term deal, but these guys have been there for a while. And so this is what Seth has encouraged us to think about. Is there a way of doing that? But, you know, that's just one use for the Lockhouses. You know, as you said, John, it's every community is different. You know, and unfortunately, Chris Lawrence, who has the Lockhouse there with Thomas More, you know, he can't join us. That's unfortunately, he can't join us today, but he has offered to help other institutions if they want to turn their Lockhouse into more of a research facility versus a bed and breakfast. So, you know, as you said, John, it's really which, you know, how the community wants to really take advantage of these resources.
Yeah, and I think it ties a little bit into the Rivertown Review program that you've been working on. Just the idea that each community maybe has its own particular needs. But there's a big advantage to these things, these sites, because they're so equitably distributed along the river.
Oh yeah.
That it feels like a trail type system, you know, like it feels like you can kind of tap into multiple of these.
You know, what would be great is to at least identify one per pool. You know, when most people think of the river, they don't really think of how it's managed. And the bottom line is it's managed by pool, you know, in a lot of, you know, and so, you know, the two largest interpretive uses of it is in one pool, you know, and so Thomas More and the Shiloh are almost adjacent to each other.
Yeah.
You know, but Vanceburg is in that same pool. But can we start to think about each pool having an interpretive center? It'd be a fascinating deal. You know, you're 100% right. John Cheek, do you have any thoughts on this? You know, if University of Cincinnati is going to extend this to next year, or what are your thoughts from what you heard?
You know what? One thing I think I can offer here is I'm a civil engineer for the Corps of Engineers, and I've spent the last 25 years maintaining the Ohio River, and I'm a closet historian. So I give an hour-long presentation just on the development of locks and dams on the Ohio River. The initial canalization from 1875 to 1929, 1955, when we started with the name locks that you see today. I'm gonna get them abbreviated, whittled down to less than 15 minutes at the end of May. But I'd be certainly willing to give you all and anyone else the long play version of that, so you can see that. You know, David, you were talking about the location of locks. So this is a book called The Ohio River from 1934, and I have charts on one side and the exact locations where everything is. With the exception, I think Trish was looking for 1, 2, and 3. And the problem was Emsworth and Dash Shields were in construction, had been constructed when this book was built, so their locations aren't included on the upper pool. But you know, I saw some very familiar graphs there with the new pools, and the numbered locks are right below there, so you can see the existing pool where everything is in one lock. I'm more familiar with Cincinnati to Cairo. That was the area I was assigned to the Louisville district. So I spent most of the way, but I do live in Cincinnati, so, and a UC grad. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, we should absolutely connect.
Yes, sir.
Is that book available for purchase, or is this one of these rare books that are only in the Inland Waters Library?
I don't know, but this one has, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Louisville District stamped on it, and I'm probably going to owe a big fine when I retire, but I'm not gonna let it go real easily. I've seen a couple of them in existence, but I don't know if it's available, widely, but it's certainly available for me to scan.
Well, that would be great. And hopefully Mark has a copy of that as well, as that he can give to the property managers as they go through and get this current status. That's what, we have a good idea of where everyone was, but what's going on with each one now and who owns it, and what constraints there are, and on and on and on.
Yeah, that is certainly different. I'll share real quick, if you don't mind. I'll just show you a look and give you perhaps a sneak peek on, but I can show you where they are. This is the presentation that I'm working on for the shop, and there's the wickets you mentioned. But this is a photo out of a book I found. Hang on, let me quick scroll in there for a minute right here. So there's all the locations of them.
That'd be great. Well, I'm looking forward to your presentation, and would love to figure out a way, John, to, make a recording of your hour-long piece that could just be posted and people could watch it streaming video, and you don't have to be there at the exact same time.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. Yes.
That would be. Do you have an idea, John, of what lock and dams we might want to, because that's what this, we're supposed to come up by the summertime of our dream of what our first step could be, and I'm just a place-based guy who, so is it Vanceburg and Parkersburg? Is there another one that you think is ripe for transformation into a public access site?
Unfortunately, I haven't been to very many of these, just because, the locks that I go to now are the modern era locks. So and then what the condition is, and you talked about a pool, and I made a mistake. That was 39 at Markland, sorry about that. I said Shiloh 34, but I meant 39. It was right there. And the locks were on the right descending bank. But if something, drivable, maybe that's a criteria. First, you probably look at condition. What's it going to take to get this structure back to something usable, and then maybe location or distance along. If you wanted one per pool, of course the pools vary so greatly now. They used to be very standard. There were 51 numbered locks built, and about 20 miles apart, because that was way back when. Now we have pools from 6 miles to 114 on the Ohio River. So I think I would look at that. I still have colleagues that grew up on, John, you mentioned buildings. They used to live there. The lock operators live there. And I have colleagues right now that grew up on those and lived on, they called it the reservation. That's what the folks call it. I don't know if interviewing them, that would be kind of interesting to know their perspective. One person that I know, his mom went to the hospital in Paducah, and he was Block 53 Lockhouse is where he lived. He went off to the Marine Corps, and he came back to the Corps, and he's never left that circle. The history stories there that we can perhaps tap into.
Now, that's exciting. I have a good friend who's a documentary filmmaker, and he's possibly interested in looking at the lock houses, but his question was, he wants to find people who were involved physically in them and living there. And so he says it's one thing to talk to a historian, but to make it come to life, you have to say, I was born here, or I worked here.
I have just the people for you, just the people for you. We can make that happen on the lower end, because we operated 52 and 53 until 2018. We're actively demolishing 52 and 53 right now, the lock structures. So those folks are still there that live there.
He's willing to make a 3 to 5 minute teaser of it. Most of his films end up going to KET or to PBS. So he has about 20 different videos on PBS. And so this, this might be a fascinating aspect of it. It'd take a little fundraising to get it from, he'll put the time in to get a 5-minute sort of preview of it. And then the challenge is to raise money to get him, because they just have certain standards at PBS level. But I'm going to stay in touch with you, John, about that.
All right, very good.
Any thoughts, John? Any other thoughts from, what help do you need to think about next year for your class? Is there some piece that you'd like to have us start to collect beyond a hour-long videotape of John Cheek talking about the history?
Well, our focus was so broad this year as we were just getting into this topic. So I think next year the game is going to be to narrow our focus a little bit. This was one of 4 different categories that we were looking at across the entire river. So it was very broad. I would say, like, next year, the lock and dam type of project is really gaining traction. I think, we would focus the studio on a topic like that, and particularly maybe even zoom in on a couple of, compelling sites and get more, get into more detail about, like, what are the needs of the community, and what are the most, like, practical uses for these spaces. It was a very broad level survey of the condition at this point. So that's where we would take it next year. So the information that John's talking about would be fantastic. I think the other slant, the only other thing that comes to mind, I think, investigating the property ownership or the complications around the logistics of these sites, like how they're owned or what the deeds are like, or, that's absolutely going to play into what sites have the most potential.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I have one other question for you, Mr. Cheek, and that is maintenance of existing facilities. I know the Corps has built all of these and has transferred a lot of them to other entities. I'm interested, I've talked to Chris Lawrence a couple times, Thomas More puts in all the money for maintenance of the facility. And is there any strategy for the Corps or other entities to help these not-for-profit or universities or park districts maintain some of this Corps-related history? And that's just an open-ended question, so I want to support Thomas More for doing more. And they're just like everybody else is under their gun. And is that FLAP program really appropriate for this, or are there other, funding streams that could be created?
I'm not aware of any. The only thing that would be close was when the new chamber at McAlpine was built, 2008, 2009, and that the Corps did provide some money to the, you remember the Marine Hospital there?
Yeah, Marine Hospital. Well, that was Chuck Parrish pushing that, I think.
That probably was, yes. But no, I don't know of any. Not to say it doesn't exist, but I don't know of any.
How does one convince the Corps to hire another Chuck Parrish? Is that something we can write a letter to some general saying, preserve your history?
And that would be a good. I would like to certainly like to see that. I think the problem is the folks that understand the value of all retired. Unfortunately, I'm still close. I'm going to try to stick around 4 more years, but I'm getting close as well. So.
Well, that's another piece.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have about just a couple minutes left, and also on this agenda is, let me see if I can share my screen here, is you mentioned talk coming up with Bob Willis and PJ Donovan. How can we promote this more? If one of our agendas is to sort of think of these lock houses, are there people up and down the river that are historians that could tie into this? So that's just an open-ended question of, what can we do to drive more people to Orsanko's river discussion, and to hear your short version?
What about the local, Hanover College comes to mind, that have a maritime or a riverine
Well,
emphasis.
unfortunately, the Hanover College, this might be an opportunity for you, John. But Hanover College, right, had the River Ecosystem Center there, funded by Eli Lilly. And unfortunately, 2 years ago, Eli Lilly pulled the funding from Hanover College because of financial mismanagement. And so there is no Eli Lilly funded academic approach to understanding the river. It was called the River Institute. And if the University of Cincinnati is looking for some long-term funding pieces, they got a fair amount of money. It lasted for maybe 10 years, had 4 directors, and so then it never really got established. But Eli Lilly Institute, or Eli Lilly, big foundation. Not Ohio though, Indiana based. But you're right. I think Hanover would be a perfect place to help promote it. But since that's dissipated, I haven't really seen some. I wonder if the Corps must have contacts in each of the cities. Sort of, is it emergency response? Is it disaster preparation? Because if something happens at one of the locks or something, there must be a notification system for politicians up and down the river. I wonder if there's a way of, or is that Mr. Donovan's role as public outreach, and we should really talk with him.
I don't know that, if PJ would know that. I know we work, the core lock folks in our naval, we work with the carriers, the barge companies of the world for sure, when there's, and mostly coordinate with them. Then we're with FEMA, we have emergency management response with local, state, federal, as the nation's engineers force. But primarily that's with other things, flooding, natural disasters, that kind of thing. It just doesn't seem like it's too much of a riverine issue that we deal with, unless it's something at a lock that affects the carriers.
And do you work much then with the Inland Waters Group? There's a guy that works with us called Marty Hettel, who
Marty Hettel, yes.
Yes. Maybe Marty would have access to some of those commercial users that have an interest in history. He seems to be an interesting character.
He is at that, yes, sir. Yeah.
Well, I'll follow up with Marty.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So the discussion series this month, or the one that's upcoming, is there a particular stretch of the river that you're focusing on, or I'm thinking about attracting audiences to this discussion series?
Mine's the entire stretch, the entire Ohio River.
Okay, so it's pretty broad then.
Yes. Yeah.
Someone from Wheeling would feel just as welcome as someone from Louisville.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. And again, at only 15 minutes, it's going to be very high, because there are so many presentations just on Wicket Dam operation. That is so unique that we can spend hours just on that. So it's going to be very high level and nonstop for 15 minutes.
Who do you think the best audience for it is?
I've primarily gone to historical societies, and I've gone to some universities, civic clubs to give this.
Okay.
Rotary clubs. has been the primary audience, but mostly historical interest.
Okay. Okay.
And what I think the problem is people don't realize what a valuable asset we have in our backyard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they just don't know to ask the question or seek out the information.
Well, if anybody has any other ideas, please forward them on to me, and I'm meeting with Orsenko people, and they're starting to view this as one of their major outreaches for, creating value in the river, or helping people understand. The last topic I have really is, as I mentioned, there is going to be this Ohio River inspection tour done by the Corps, and it's going to be in September, and we've been invited to suggest people to talk. The Corps, it appears to be a pretty well scripted presentation to the decision makers in the Corps, and it's everything that the Corps does, flooding and and so but they have four public meetings, and we've been invited to suggest somebody, and so I wanted to see if we might be ready by September to attend one of the meetings, and if so, who might be interested. And personally, I think having some of your students, John, even though they were from last semester, most of the times these tours are done by professionals, and it's just great to have a youth voice or a young person's voice occasionally. And so I don't know, but what do you think, John? Is this appropriate for an inspection tour discussion?
John Cheek?
Yeah, John Cheek, sorry, to John.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, this is, if you've never seen one of these, the Motor Vessel Mississippi does these tours. It's a Mississippi River Commission.
Right.
If you've been on one, I think it would be great seeing some students pile into the meeting room. This is the biggest towboat on the planet, I think, and just an opportunity to see that. So you're going to talk to two-star generals there, and the civilians on the Mississippi River Commission. Yeah, it'd be certainly a wonderful opportunity to make them aware of what we'd like to do here.
And so the date hasn't been set yet, but it is this September, and one of the meetings is in Cincinnati. They're skipping Louisville. They're doing maybe Pittsburgh and Huntington and Cincinnati and Paducah, I think, but I don't have them here in front of me. But it would be great to have that. So just wanted to put that on your agenda, and I have till May 5th to recommend somebody. So if you want to think about it, John, let me know. Otherwise,
Okay.
You can't really present Mr. Cheek, can you? Or is this for Corps people to talk as well, or the community?
It's the community. Yeah, it's not me talking to them. No.
You're supposed to be listening.
That's why I'm using my Gmail account for this.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So David, if you don't mind expanding a little bit, what's the focus of the September meeting?
John, can you give an overview of what a inspection tour does and why it exists?
Yeah, and I got to do it real quickly because I've got a call that I've got to host here in just a couple minutes. So it's a group of the senior leaders that represent the river basin. So this is the Great Lakes and Ohio River Division Commander. So the 17-state area of the Ohio River, Mississippi Valley, the entire Mississippi River Valley, and then it's these inspection tours are done both called high water and low water, and they just come and listen to people's concerns about the waterways, and it's just anything that people want to talk about. Of course, it's got to be approved to get on, but they just want to listen to the stakeholders of the waterways.
Okay.
So these are the best ears to get to, because you do not get to these type senior leaders very often this easily.
And it's not about a decision for today, they're looking at the long picture. Do we need 6 more locks? Do we want to do this? Do we need to renovate 3 of them? Or let's recognize history, Let's help our citizens understand the trajectory of management of our rivers, or preserve our technology, because sometimes I think we are in technology reverse occasionally. Yes, I believe in technology, but boy, the stuff that happened in early 1900s was fascinating, and sometimes maybe more sustainable than what we're doing today. But just an opportunity. I'll touch base with you, Mr. Stratton, later on to see if you really are interested in.
Yeah, and the Corps got a big kick now to innovate, and I'm going to have to hop off innovation. So I don't know if we can link this to innovation somehow. Going backwards and using these projects to tell a story might be considered innovative now. So.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye, John.
Bye.
Thank you, Trish, for coming on. And John, if there's anything I can do to help, certainly let me know. And I'm going to share your screen. Here's another opportunity, John. I work with a group called the River Management Society, and we have a journal that is quarterly, and each year focuses on a different area. This summer is the Ohio River Basin. I wrote an article last issue on the work of this Recreation Trail Committee. And I don't know if you're interested in publishing an article on your class. And it's, 800 words to 2,500 words.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it might be a nice way to kind of recap or just kind of wrap up, the work of this past few months. I'd absolutely be interested in something like that.
I will introduce you to Risa, who is executive director of it and is recruiting people to do such. I'm also recommending that Victor write one on the Ohio River challenges.
Nice.
So we'll see. Well, John, thanks for coming on, and I wish there was a bigger audience, but we'll share this with other folks.
That's exciting. And let me wrap my head around that September thing. That it sounds really interesting. I don't know what the right let's say I don't know if it aligns or not. The
broke
things
up. What was the last
we would be
question,
talking
last
about would be
you
like
said?
Yeah, I was saying I don't know if the work that we're doing would align with that meeting or not. It's not necessarily immediate concerns on the river, but it's more projecting and thinking about possibilities for the river.
I personally think that's what they want to hear. I don't think they want to hear what's wrong today.
Okay.
But what's the future? What could that future be?
Okay.
And a whole length of what would happen if each one of these things turned into a research lab to bring math and science and technology to the local citizens. There's all sorts of ways of cutting it, but it's just a suggestion.
No, it's super interesting. I just that's a really interesting opportunity. I'll talk more through email with you about it. I think it's a good opportunity.
Just
I appreciate it.
I want to encourage you and the University of Cincinnati to do more. And so maybe this is the beginning of a Tennessee River line on the Ohio River.
Yeah, exactly. No, I appreciate it. Always good to talk to you.
Now, here is another opportunity. Next week, we're doing these Rivertown reviews. And on Monday, we are in Augusta, along with Brewster Rhodes and Jack Sutton and a couple other people, from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And then on Thursday, we're in Dearborn County, looking at Lawrenceburg and Aurora. And if you have time on either one of those days, you'd be more than welcome to participate.
This coming Monday and this coming Thursday?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I'll check. Let me, I'll confirm with you in an email.
Sounds great. And I'll forward you that information when you do.
Okay, cool.
It's like
Thanks.
10 to 2 or something like that. Maybe 10 to 2 for Augusta and maybe 10 to 4 for Dearborn County, because we're doing both Lawrenceburg and
You
Aurora.
did too. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think let me check my calendar. I don't want to commit right now, but I think I can probably make one of those work potentially. It'd be interesting to see it.
Yeah, and plus it's an opportunity. I don't know if you know Jack Sutton. He's a fascinating guy. He ended up being he was director of Cincinnati Parks, or no, Greater Hamilton County Parks for 30 years.
Nice.
And Brewster is just Brewster.
Yeah. No, it'd be great to meet you all in person.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
Take
Good to see your
care.
face.
Bye.
Take care.